Hello, my name is Ken Cross and I'm running for the office of President of the United States as a Reform Party candidate. The topic of today's video is strengthening the economy. What strengthens an economy, any economy of any country, or the world economy for that matter? There are two major ways to strengthen an economy. I will discuss the second best way first. The second best way is demand. By increasing demand, then there is job creation and wage growth, and the job creation and wage growth results in people having more money, and they use that money to buy things, which increases demand. And with the increased demand, businesses hire more people and create more jobs and wage growth. And that results in a cycle called a virtuous cycle or a beneficial cycle. And the job growth, the demand, the job growth continues on and strengthens an economy. I owned a number of businesses. One of them was a furniture business. When I ran that business, if there was increased demand for my furniture, I would hire more people. And hiring those people provided them with money and wages, and they might buy other things in the community or go to McDonald's or Burger King and spend their money. And then those companies would hire people. So that's how the beneficial cycle works. There was a meeting of the G7, which is a group of 7 wealthy countries, just recently. On May 21st, 16, there was an Associated Press article written by Elaine Kurtenbach entitled G7 Talks Seek Way to Shore Up Global Economy. Well, the group of 7 is 7 wealthy countries: United States, Canada, Japan, Great Britain, Germany, France, and Italy. Well, the finance minister from Germany, Taro Aso, was quoted as saying, "We as G7 believe the biggest economic problem is demand. Demand. There is no demand, and that is the biggest problem around the world," Aso said. Well, we'll have a little fun at G7's expense for a minute. When I was just a little kid, I used to watch a detective series with a Chinese detective named Charlie Chan. And when he would find a clue, like a receipt, he would say, "So the murder weapon belonged to the butler." Well, here we have something that is exceedingly obvious to any business person, that demand is how you increase growth. And that is a statement said by Aso. I don't know if God had anything to do with naming the Japanese finance minister Aso to come to that conclusion, but if he did, he definitely has a sense of humor. It wasn't just Aso. It also says in the article that the consensus was that all economies are facing a stifling lack of demand. Now, the G7 didn't say what to do about increasing the demand, just acknowledged that demand was a factor in world growth. Well, the important thing is that we need to do something to improve that demand in order to strengthen the world economy. So they did not discuss any methods particularly of doing that, but the reason that increasing demand is the second instead of the best way to improve a country's growth is that often governments, to include demand, include tax cuts for corporations and businesses. And a lot of corporations complain about high taxes all over the world, and they press governments and elected officials to cut taxes on the basis that it will strengthen economies. The truth is, largely with tax cuts, corporations use the money to have mergers and acquisitions, which often result in fewer people being employed, more layoffs, extra pay raises for executives, stock buybacks, and increased dividends for shareholders. So goods and services demand is increased some with tax cuts, but not very much and not nearly enough. And as a result, there are better ways than trying to increase demand through tax cuts to stimulate economies. The best way for governments to create growth is to focus on the jobs component, the job creation, to utilize the resources in their countries, the workers, by creating the jobs and increasing wealth of people through payroll increases and raises, then the demand for products is increased. It's the same beneficial cycle, but the focus is on job creation. For example, Spain currently has an unemployment rate of above 20%, and actually it's over 46% for people less than 25 years old. It should occur to Spain and to other countries of the G7 that if you put people to work contributing and they are paid a wage, that they will have more money to stimulate demand. But how do you put people to work? That's a fair question, because that's what you have to do to stimulate employment and demand. Well, one of the best ways that I know is my Fair Jobs Plan. With my Fair Jobs Plan, businesses that pay workers $10 or less are reimbursed the full gross amount they pay those workers on a monthly basis, submitted to the state, which is forwarded to the federal government for reimbursement, so that the small businesses and even large businesses that pay workers $10 or less get free labor, essentially. So the benefit is that the businesses then can have fewer, lower cost, and the workers can be working and have more money to buy things. My jobs plan, I estimate, would cost about $80 billion a year, which is a lot less than the $1,000 billion a year that some other candidates are talking about in tax cuts. But I'll talk about how the plan will be paid for later. Why $10 an hour? We have the Democrats talking about 15 an hour with Bernie Sanders, or Hillary Clinton talking about $12.50 an hour. Why 10? Well, currently, all of the 50 states have minimum wages of 10 or less. California and New York are the high end, some are at a much lower end. The federal rate is still $7.25. So you have to take a step at a time. We wonder why there is such reluctance of Congress to raise the minimum wage, because the point is that you would stimulate the economy. The concern in Congress, the House of Representatives, is that if you raise the wages, that you would hurt small businesses and the workers would be out of jobs, even those who are working for minimum wage. But with my plan, you wouldn't hurt small businesses, you would help small businesses, because instead of $7.50 that or 25 that's being paid workers, the businesses would pay the workers essentially nothing, because they would be reimbursed for the wages. And so the concern about low wages in Mexico or Bangladesh would not be a concern anymore, because they'd never be less than zero. and we would stimulate again the garment industry in this country and greatly help farming and other industries. So the point is, Congress has the role of making the laws that determine what the minimum wage is. The notion that Bernie Sanders can say it should be 15 an hour is a nice talk, but the President of the United States doesn't decide that. If the President decided that, then Barack Obama would have made the minimum wage $10 years ago. It is Congress that has the power of the purse, that enacts legislation about wages, the minimum wage. The second aspect of my plan for increasing employment would be an infrastructure improvement plan. How would I do that? Well, I would set forth $100 billion a year as proposed to Congress, set aside for infrastructure improvement. The important aspect of that is that we're not just looking at something nice about infrastructure improvement. The United States of America is our home. We have roads, bridges, ports, airports, all sorts of investments in our country that we are neglecting. The Mianus River Bridge in Greenway, Connecticut in 1983 collapsed. The cause was metal corrosion and fatigue, deferred maintenance. 3 were killed and 5 injured. The Tennessee Hatchie River Bridge near Henning, Tennessee in 1989 caused deterioration of foundation timber piles, 8 killed, and there are many more. The I-5 bridge disaster in 1995, piers collapsed, 7 killed. One could say, well, there's thousands of bridges, and there are 607,000 bridges in the United States. Currently, 69,000 of them are classified as structurally deficient, which means they are recognized to need major repairs or should be replaced. So we should replace them. So that costs $100 billion a year. So how do we pay for these things? We're running deficits now. Well, the thing is that this country is not poor and does not have inadequate funds to do what it needs to do to protect and strengthen the country. We have in the Thursday, May 26 paper of Arkansas Democrat Gazette, says CEO pay up 4.5%, those stocks flat. CEO pay last year increased $468,000, more than 10 times what the typical worker makes. And that was the increase alone. The typical pay is $10.8 million a year. Sounds like a lot. That $10.8 million is still less than some athletes make at $20 million. So we also have, and this can be verified, we have the top 5 hedge fund managers who make $1 billion a year, over $1 billion a year, over 1,000 million a year, every year. And of the top 25 hedge fund managers, they average over 500 million a year, $500 million. And that's okay. It's a great thing in this country that people can work hard and apply themselves and make fantastic wages and compensation. The point is that we should be appreciative of living here where we can make that kind of money and that pay enough taxes to be able to take care of our roads and to provide employment for the working poor at a reasonable wage. With my graduated flat tax, the highest tax that anybody would pay would be 30%, a little less than 30% actually. but there would be no major deductions of any type other than just the IRA types of deductions so that people would prepare for their retirement. But people will reject that because they have so many tax breaks and loopholes that, you know, they talk about a high rate of 39%, but they don't pay that. And the same is true with my corporate tax plan. I would eliminate the income tax totally. It's almost a farce anyway, or a joke. They talk about a high rate of 39%, and there have been 60 billion made from corporations where they paid no tax and had tax deductions carried forward. It's the loopholes that prevents the corporate taxes from being paid. I would replace the income tax totally, take the income tax out, replace it with a 4% revenue tax. Now, that tax would be on all revenues brought in to a company, and the company would decide on how it dispersed its finances and income. And they could reduce all of the corporate tax accountants and lawyers who are so costly that are advising them how to avoid taxation. The first 200,000 of revenues would be tax-free for all businesses. That would help small businesses and entrepreneurs get started and enable them to hire, which they are the major employers of the country, and hire most of those on the low end of the pay scale. The graduated flat tax personally and the corporate tax plan would cover more than enough for covering the infrastructure plan and the fair jobs plan. Would also eliminate the cost of business, as I said, for hiring tax avoidance specialists and lobbyists. It is not a large number. Some people will be rejecting the number of 4%, but we know what 4% is. As citizens, we pay a much higher percent on the income we bring in on our taxes. So this is not a very large number. General Motors offered 15% cash back for buying vehicles recently, and they've had 0% interest. Even if they did have to pay the 4%, then they would build that 4% into product price anyway. So since there's about just shy of $20 trillion of gross domestic product, 4% of that would be about 800 billion, which would be almost 4 times as much as corporations pay now. So we need to collect that money, and we can afford to collect that money. There's huge amounts of corporate cash sitting out there that is not being invested because the corporations do not perceive that there will be adequate demand for their products to justify investment. And they won't hire if they don't see that increased demand for their products. They won't expand. So the point is we need to take these other types of measures to get people working, to stimulate growth, and to make improvements that are long overdue in our infrastructure. And we have loads of money to do that. It's just that we've gotten to a point in time when the people in Congress have defined any tax increase as a terrible thing, even though we could use those taxes for good purposes to strengthen the nation. George Washington, in his farewell address, said, "As a very important source of strength and security, cherish public credit." He said that it is important to realize that in order to pay debts, there must be revenues. In order to have revenues, there must be taxes. That no taxes can be devised that are not inconvenient, and unpleasant. So he knew that you had to have enough taxes to be able to run a country, to pay the bills. If I'm elected President of the United States, there will be those tax plans pursued and to be put in place that will enable us to take care of the country, to help the working poor work, and also to balance the budget. By my 4th year in office, I will have a balanced budget, working with Congress, and they still have the power of the purse, but the President has access to the people, and I would talk on a regular basis promoting that we manage our country in a prudent way. This is the last of the series this spring of videos that I have prepared about various issues. And I encourage you to look through those videos. I've gone into greater depths in some of these areas in those videos. I would like to say in closing the following. Negative advertising and personal character attacks have become common in modern day politics. Nevertheless, the people deserve a much higher level of statesmanship than what they have been receiving so far from Democrats and Republicans this election cycle. I have focused on serious national issues and have developed detailed corrective action plans for consideration. The United States citizenry should expect no less from every other presidential candidate. Requiring presidential candidates to focus on serious issues would help voters to determine the best candidate to become the next President of the United States. Thank you for your time. Goodbye.